so good to be here. Thank you for that beautiful song. And thanks, everybody, for inviting me to join you here on a Sunday morning. It's been about, like 10 years since I was here on a Sunday morning. They never let me out, you know. But I have been here in the evening a few times over the years as we've engaged in interfaith work together. I think particularly of several of the gay pride services were annual events. We had interfaith gathering here shortly after the election, the last presidential election, and after the fires as well. And I'm just very grateful to be here and feel a nice connection with you all. We've overlapped members and friends through the years, and I feel a lot of connection with you. And I think we have a lot in common, as I'll say. One thing, as I understand it, from talking to Dr. Edward before I visited you, that we have in common, interestingly, is when and whether to clap in a worship service. Right. Yeah. Week after week, someone comes up and offers their side of the debate to me after the service. And, you know, I'll tell you, generally there we have gone for the more contemplative, non-clapping route. But no one has ever clapped as I've approached the pulpit in my church before, and so I'm thinking, you know, maybe we really can learn from each other. It's a strange experience to be a guest for a community that you may very well not have this kind of opportunity to speak with again for some foreseeable time, to be just a guest preacher once. And it actually was reminding me as I was getting ready of the sermons that we deliver when we're in search as a Unitarian Universalist minister. Our way of organizing is every congregation is independent, and they get to pick their minister, and there's kind of an internet dating that makes it all come together. And when you go to kind of offer yourself to the search committee of that community, they go out and watch you preach one time, somewhere, right? At usually a neutral congregation where no one knows you can sneak over there and so forth. And the question for me always in those, as it is today, was, okay, on the one hand, if I only have one chance to speak to you, then I want to make sure that I fulfill my preacherly duty, which more than any other thing is to leave you feeling hopeful and inspired and aware that love is a real conscious power that's on your side and on everybody's side. Not only is everything going to be okay, it is okay. Leave you feeling that you have the power to act in the world and that the call to serve is supported by the divine. So I always wanted to give like the one sermon that would change everybody's life. And then, of course, when you're in search, you're also doing something that's like, hi, I'm Chris. I want to be your minister. Let's be friends. And I am definitely bringing that piece as well. Like, hi, I'm Chris. I'm the minister of the Unitarian Universalist congregation. We're just downtown. And you may or may not ever invite me to come here and speak to you again, but we're there, and you're here. And we're on the same team, and we should be better friends. Yeah, okay. I note some of our similarities. Your yearly support, tithe to nonprofits, is mirrored in our practice of taking half of our collection every week and just directly giving it away to a worthy organization. And by the time I'm done there, I mean to give it away entirely every week. That's another year or two away. That we're communities that are openly, plainly inviting of a diverse expression of genders and sexual orientations, and we don't want things to limit us. We want to be inclusive. So much so that we acknowledge that there are truths and useful perspectives from all the world's religions. We also have in common banners that hang on the side of our sanctuary that have symbols of most of the world's traditions. I say most. I notice that the flaming chalice of Unitarian Universalism might not have made the lotus flower unless it's that top circle which stands for other, which is usually where we find ourselves because we're so tiny. On the form, when you fill out what religion you are, I usually check other. So it goes. And as I understand it, what we also have in common is a desire to make an impact in the wider world. I know that you're spending maybe even a whole year looking at this theme of what does our faith look like when we put it into action. And that's a place where I hope our friendship really develops. What can further interfaith cooperation between our communities look like? What do we have to teach each other? And one thing we may be able to offer is a way of being really active in the world, because that is certainly one of the hallmarks of my tradition, Unitarian Universalism. Long, horrible name, comes from two different traditions, the Unitarians, the Universalists. Neither could give up their name. So we're the Unitarian Universalists. But from the time those traditions emerged out of the kind of liberal wing of the Protestant Reformation, they were developing a commitment to enacting faith in the real world through service to other people and through political engagement. And we kind of, on the Unitarian side, look back to the 1800s as the glory days of abolitionists and suffragists and reformers of mental health institutions and public schools and so forth, as kind of our glory days, founded, or rooted, I should say, in the core Unitarian belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, in the usefulness and goodness of our capacity of reason, and that people are basically good, that a human being is a good thing. Created in God's image. But that didn't mean much if you weren't actually out, helping the lot of those other folks who were created in God's image, who are hungry or poor or whatever it might be. And also born of a deep commitment to individual understanding in religion, combined with that desire to make the world a better place, leads to one of our great little pithy statements, which is that Unitarian Universalism is about deeds, not creeds. Deeds, not creeds. And is kind of boiled down over a century of coming to really question the efficacy of kind of the old religious forms and religious language, and thinking, well, if we can't agree, we're not ever really sure what we're talking about when we're talking about God or salvation or these other things. But one thing we can surely agree on is people need food. People need love. People need roofs over their head. And so the tradition has really anchored itself sort of first and foremost in a humanistic ethics. And as I'll say as I go on, maybe at some cost of losing track of the equally essential work of growing one's own soul and inner spirit, which is something I think you have to teach us. As it is, my congregation, just to kind of give you an example, is that maybe folks here are thinking about what would it mean for us to be really active in the world. We have for now 14 years served breakfast to anybody who's hungry every Saturday morning, which is like 150 to 200 people. And they apparently like ours best because we don't make them pay for it by sitting through a sermon. Yeah. Unlike us here this morning, I guess, where, you have to... which, to me is, I certainly would be happy to speak to anyone who comes to the breakfast and help them try and find the spiritual resources to change their circumstances if they want to. But for crying out loud, can't we just have breakfast? And our answer is, yes, you can just have breakfast. Our primary way of engaging in the world, I would say, is through the North Bay Organizing Project, which Tara referenced, which is a coalition of religious communities and issue groups and activist groups that work together to try and build a broad-based coalition to make changes right here in our own community. We've been active with housing issues, fighting for affordable housing, working to create a tenants union, and bring forward at least a debate on rent control. The issues are housing, immigration rights, and the environment that we work with there. And it's forever a challenge, of course, to get people involved, but one other bit of wisdom I want to impart is it only takes a few people, right? If the will of the community is we want to be a voice for justice in the wide world, that actually doesn't take a unanimous vote. It takes a few folks pushing it and getting it out there, and I think we're doing good work there with the organizing project. And boy, we took a big leap in just the last few weeks, prompted by the visit of our assistant minister to the border. We have now adopted a family who are seeking asylum. The mother and her 2 children. We had hoped to have the husband-father come up as well, but in the journey, he was detained and in fact deported back to Honduras. And it's just one of these things where somebody, literally one person in the congregation was just like, I cannot take it anymore. And got people involved in conversation. I think some folks from this community are part of that and other congregations. And, it's one of these things where when you look at it clearly, one family seems like such a little thing, right? But to that family, it's everything. It's everything. I think we're literally saving lives. And this work is not only just, I hope, plainly good for these people, but it's good for the community as well, and it's good for the individuals who partake of it. The topic I was given to speak to today, living an empowered life, nice and broad, is familiar territory because Empower People is actually part of the mission of our congregation. Celebrate life, empower people, care for one another, help to build a better world. Deeds, not creeds. What Celebrate Life means to you, what your divine source is, that's kind of up to you. But, and Empower People to me means a few things in the context of religious community. It's sharing leadership. It's giving people the opportunity to speak and have a voice by inviting lots of people into worship and lots of people into leadership and to activism. It's having a group called the Advocates for Social Justice who are empowered to take public positions on behalf of the congregation so they can stand at a protest with a sign that reminds people of faith care about this issue. I want people to come on Sundays and feel empowered also by remembering, that cosmic love energy that's in the center of the whole thing. And also to feel empowered, and perhaps you have some experience of this here, in that unique way that only comes when we finally bind ourselves into groups and live in community and allow ourselves to be changed and transformed by bonking into each other as we try and figure things out and build the world up together. And that power, that one you really can't find on your own. You can't stay home and meditate on the power of community. I mean, you can, but I think you might miss the point. Yeah. And we need that power. Like, all community building, relational, loving, open to each other power is required right now in these challenging times in which we live, right? I mean, I'm not going to share the bad news with you of how tense and angry, how volatile, how precarious things feel around us right now, such that it feels like we don't really have a choice to think. Should we bring our loving community power to bear in the world or not? What kind of world do you hope that it will be living in 10, 15, 20 years from now? The answer is yes, we have to bring it forward. Now, I obviously am from a tradition that will do that. It's easy to be overwhelmed if you start thinking, how am I going to change the world? You don't have to. Maybe just change ourselves and change the little bit of things around us that we can find. But we do need to engage somehow. Our president of our denomination says this is no time for a casual faith, right? It's time for an active, engaged faith. I take a lot of comfort these days, as hard as things are right now, with a couple of techniques, which might sound strange. One is, I remember that in the end, the sun blows up and the earth expires. Is everybody feeling better? Which is to say, take the long haul view, take the cosmic view, and put things in perspective. It's not that family that we're caring for isn't legitimately suffering and scared. They really are. But in the cosmic view, like, we don't win or lose this game. It's like, it really is, what are we going to do right now? We don't have to save the world for the long haul. We just have to save the world for today. And as for our current conditions in society and politics and so forth, this is another one that might seem strangely comforting, is I don't think things are worse than they ever have been. I mean, actually, as unbelievable as it may seem, things are constantly getting better, even as hard as they are right now. Things aren't worse than they ever have been. They're as bad as they've ever been. They're just as bad as they've ever been. We actually do live in a country that only 160 years ago enslaved people. The things that are bubbling up in our world right now, they were already there. Just the first time you see the termites is not when the termites got into your house. All right? So all that's really been done is like, oh, we got termites. Which, I'm not going to work that analogy too far, because generally speaking, you do have to exterminate the termites. And we're not going to exterminate anybody. We're going to love our way into the eventual, victory. So for me, the spiritual life is this balancing act between that inner component of healing and awakening, of tuning in to, divine power, God power, and feeling what it's calling of us, and then taking that feeling of calling and putting it out into the world. There's inner transformation, there's outer transformation, and if we're on the sweet spot of that spiritual surfboard, right, we're kind of like riding that wave in between the two of those things. We can cultivate that inner private part, and we can cultivate that outer part. And as you learn to surf, when you start off like, oh, well, I wonder if I could write a letter to my congressperson, or I wonder if I could show up city council and yell at somebody, and it turns out you can, right? You found that inner strength, you tried that outer thing, that felt good, now you go back, you realize you got more power, you can surf ever harder waves. In my tradition, what I fear is that actually we kind of fell off one side of the surfboard. We've so emphasized that ethic of activism and engagement with the world that I fear at times, not in my congregation, but in all the other bad ones, have lost, that real connection to spiritual love energy. There's a joke about this. A UU family moves into a new neighborhood. The little girl finds a playmate, and they're getting to know each other, and one day the playmate says, oh, we're Episcopalians, what are you? And the UU child thinks for a minute and says, I think we're League of Women Voters. And the price of overemphasizing that activism without taking the time to grow love energy in our hearts is that it's hard to fight despair. It's hard if you place your faith entirely in human beings as they present themselves, without maybe remembering the thing that's hidden even in the nastiest and cruelest of us. And once upon a time, my folks had the rosiest view of the future. Onward and upward forever was literally our vision, that humans would just continue to evolve. Now, I believe that, actually. I think that's actually what's happening. But as my folks turned more and more away from kind of the spiritual side and more just into the human realm, unfortunately, the 20th century kind of kicked that humanistic faith's rear end a little bit. Because we thought, humans are wonderful. They're just going to keep growing in love and divine power. And, oh my God, then they had World War I and World War II. And what I think I'm trying to bring to my folks is the reminder that no matter how great our collective failure or our individual failure, that core wisdom and that core love, power, and awakeness is in you, and it's waiting to come out again. Get back on the horse. Try it again. So I hope we, from you, take some of that spiritual vision. I sing these songs. I study kind of the core teachings. I feel great inspiration and energy from those. And I invite you then maybe to consider taking that power that you're cultivating and joining us and bringing it out into the wide world. Maybe come on down and volunteer at the breakfast, or come and talk to Reverend Tara, find out what some of these ways to engage our larger community are. We have to do this. It's, I think, a responsibility. Whether or not we want to invite the sorrow of people who are oppressed into our consciousness, they are out there, oppressed and sorrowful, right? And so the rub is not how do I keep myself protected from that, but how do I grow in love and awareness even as I bring the reality of the pain of the world into myself. It's a two-way street, right? This is a relational enterprise. Of the various kind of core teachings I see from your tradition, so much of beauty there, this universal spirit operating in and through us. And I was caught by one quote in particular from Holmes. I am surrounded by this creative mind, the mind of God, which receives the direct impress of my thought and acts upon it. Yeah, that's how prayer works. But I just affirm that goes both ways. That the creative mind wants to impress its thoughts upon us and put us to work, right? It, she, he, they, needs us in order to express what it's actually calling with its power of love. So when we have an image of, gee, I really need to do something about that, that's the divine speaking in us, saying, yeah, I'm entrusting you with that vision. Please go and do something about it. So I hope you will find your calling as time goes forward. Start to join us out there with a sign at a protest or two, maybe. It's not an easy process to become involved in that way. We have to be real and patient with each other. True change in this world, oh my God, it goes so slowly, really. And that's another pitfall is you see how tense things are. We think we have to save it all at once, and we forget that it's in, the flow of something a lot bigger and a lot slower than we are. And we just finally, the greatest challenge of all, and where the greatest awakening comes, I find, for myself, is remembering that oneness, which was so beautifully spoken to in that prayer, the all that isness of this, right, that we love and that we affirm is good, it's not just the good parts. The itness of the world right now contains the sorrow and suffering of the world. And I think it's there to call a new level of response and love and trust out of us. And That's what's required in these times. We don't need more enemies. We need more people who are making friends and spreading the word of love. I believe I have ended. Okay. Thank you for not clapping and actually joining me now, if you would, in a few minutes of silence. I'm going to ring these bells. This is something we also have in common. I'm pleased that we sit for about 5 full minutes in every service. And I think that, much like serving people food on Saturday mornings, is the heartbeat of our community. So let's just be still together and find what we discover there, and then I'll come out of that with a prayer. Loving God, you are as close as our own breath, as close as our own heartbeat, as close as our own thoughts, in and of and for all things. And we feel you in our bodies and this gathered body, and give thanks for this time together, for this community, for all communities of seekers who are growing their souls and growing in service to the world. Give us the courage to face the challenges before our world, its injustices and sufferings. Give us the strength to take risks and to find our voice, and to take our one voice and let it become many voices. Let the power of love be in us and defeat the forces of hatred and confusion. And thank you for all that is our life. Amen. And so it is. Okay, thanks.